P.R. King is my grandfather, Percy Robert King. He was an engineer by trade and spent a lot of time in the South China Sea. When we moved to Sydney, he set up shop in Marrickville. He was a machinery and engineer and machinery merchant. Basically, they would buy old machinery, do it up and resell it, and they would do quite a bit of design work too. Every now and again, Percy would go off on a bit of a tangent, and I think the best example of that is the Tyalgum, a coastal trader that went ashore at Tweed Heads. He took it on to salvage the boat, and he took his boys out of school and took the chaps out of the factory, and they all went up there and got the boat off the sandbar and put it out to sea where they dropped anchor. Put a skipper on board. The story goes that the skipper got very drunk. Storm came up, and next thing we know, the boat is back on the sandbar again, but this time unsalvageable. But it was just like a lot of what Percy did in life. He took on really great challenges and was always very adventuresome sort of a chap. He had 2 sons and 2 daughters, all of whom went to university, but his 2 boys went off to war. Lindsay, my father, joined the army as an engineer, and his other son, Alec, joined the Navy. When they came back from the war, Percy gave Lindsay and Alec jobs with the company. And at that stage, the boys started to think, well, we don't want to be just engineers and machinery merchants, we will start designing things. So they started designing the big roll-on, roll-off doors for ships. They did quite a few winches for the snowy mountains and some of the big buildings that were going around in town. But someone asked Alec, actually, if he could design something to take people up and down the hillsides in some of the steep blocks around Sydney, mainly over in the eastern suburbs. And they had a look at the problem, and they thought they'd do a wire rope called winch, because they knew about winches. But it didn't take them long to realise that the wire rope wasn't the best way of doing it. Anyway, they took the Swiss rack and pinion railway system and designed the inclinator with a trailing cable and a dummy wheel at the bottom, which took the slack up in the cable. Lindsay and Alec were very sound engineers with their designs. They didn't take any shortcuts, and that's why the longevity of the lift has proven itself over the years. Way over-designed in many respects. But then when you consider that these lifts were outside for over 50 years and still running strong, you can see that perhaps what they did to begin with was the right way. Some of the designs they did in those early days, such as the winches for the snowy mountains, are still in use today. And if you go down to the Munyang power station, quite often you'll see the winch there that they used to lower down into some of the lower reaches of the power station is still working, and that's a P.R. King and Sons lift. It goes back to the 1950s. I joined the company in the 80s, and at this stage the company had 2 main sections. One was the inclinators and inclined lifts, and that was expanded to take into stair lifts, and Lindsay designed some wheelchair lifts as well. The stairlift story is quite interesting. There was Ted Cheney from America had developed a company that made what they called weakelators, which was a rack and pinion lift on an I-beam, and Ted agreed to sell them to Lindsay and Alec to install, but Lindsay and Alec took one look at it and thought, well, we can build those here, and Ted Cheney gave them the right to build them for a small fee, not thinking for one moment that these upstarts from Australia could actually do it, but they did do it for many, many years. It was a terrible lift to make. They worked well, but they were not. It was a very difficult lift to make. And the other part of the business at that stage was bringing in wrapping machinery from Switzerland, from Kustners. At one stage there, 90% of the dairy products produced in Australia were wrapped or packaged by equipment that P.R. King and Sons had designed. In the mid-80s, actually it was about 82, we were designing our own platform wheelchair lift when, I'm not sure if it was Alec or Lindsay, went over to Switzerland, and one of our suppliers over there said, look, why don't you look at this product that Garaventa is producing, which was an ingeniously designed wheelchair platform lift, incline platform lift. So we talked to Garaventa in Switzerland. They said, look, we're setting up our own company in Canada because the market in the US is so large that we will make them over there, which suited us because of the language problems. And we started dealing with Garaventa. Once again, a long and successful relationship between the two companies. Around about the mid-80s, we joined up with Terry Lifts from Manchester, and Mr. Terry made this counterbalanced wheelchair lift, completely manual, but if the balancing between the weights and the person in the wheelchair was correct, it was extremely easy to wind the lift up and down. Terry have gone on from that to build other lifts, powered lifts, and expanded the company quite considerably, and we've been dealing with them and their wheelchair lifts ever since, very successfully, and once again a very good relationship between the two companies. In the mid-90s, Stannah over in the UK were looking for an agent in Australia. They were being looked after by DV Lifts, and I went across to England and signed up with the Stannah as the Stannah agent almost straight away. It was an opportunity too good to miss. They were a great company making a beautiful lift, much better than the stairlift we were making, which was the original old Weekolator from America. It's proved to be a very successful partnership between Stannah and P.R. King and Sons. The Spanish were making some very, very good vertical lifts. We decided to team up with Ralloway. Ralloway is actually owned by two very big Spanish companies. They supply us now with a complete range of lifts. My son Oliver joined in 2008, and that's the fourth generation coming through. With an accounting background, has brought the company on to a way of running it to quite different to the engineers that used to run the company. And to his credit, it's proved to be very successful.